I'm Harry Borden. I'm a photographer and I studied at Plymouth College of Art. Something happened, something clicked. I think it was the environment of being with other photographers, and I gravitated towards the people that were really into the medium, and a spark was lit. I left there kind of obsessed with photography. I've had loads of exhibitions, but I guess the most meaningful one would be I had a solo exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery. I sort of photographed the great and the good over probably 20 years at that point. And amongst that kind of cultural landscape, I'd photographed a lot of business people and become the main photographer at this magazine called Management Today, which was quite sort of avant-garde business photography. A couple of years ago, I got my 13th picture in the National Portrait Gallery. In the context of your career, they sort of change people's perception of you, and they put you on another level, and they kind of validate you. And with the view of eventually having a sort of a grand retrospective at the National Portrait Gallery when I'm an old man. So obviously it was a great opportunity to photograph Baroness Thatcher. She was this truly iconic figure that I didn't think I'd get an opportunity to photograph, because when I came to London, when I was starting out as a photographer, I wasn't really a big enough deal to get that opportunity. I was photographing Michael Hutchence, his band In Excess, and at the time I sort of spent a week with him in Paris. I was away from my young kids at the time, and I was thinking, this is kind of not a good use of my time, you know, and it ended up being the last shoot that he did. You know, he died in kind of lurid circumstances a few months later, and then the pictures sort of become quite iconic and is in the Australian National Portrait Gallery in Canberra. The pictures were used in a posthumous album of material that he'd been working on. So things like that have to change the context of your pictures. So I tend to sort of look how my work will be perceived in sort of a couple of decades rather than right now, and not dwell on worrying about. I mean, another great example is the Spice Girls. I remember being in Bangkok with them and photographing them, and then, you know, the picture's now in the National Portrait Gallery, and it's quite an iconic picture, and it sort of tells us about what it was like in the mid-90s and what they kind of represent something, you know. My dad was Jewish, he was an atheist. He wasn't a Holocaust survivor, but the idea of the Holocaust sort of loomed large in his consciousness and his identity. So in part it was a kind of exploration of my identity, and it seemed like an obvious thing to do, as a good use of my time, because I thought even then, you know, that in time there'll be fewer and fewer people who have first-hand experience. Half the people I photographed for my book have died, have passed, and so, you know, I'm reminded that it was important to kind of be clear about your objectives and your motivation. It was a really great experience. But what I'd say now is that there isn't so much of a structure, and in some respects it's quite hard, but in other respects it's quite exciting, because if you genuinely produce a body of work that's extraordinary, you can generate a lot of heat very, very quickly through putting it out there on your social media channels. If I had one piece of advice, I would say use social media not as a means of entertaining yourself, use it as a means of publishing your material.